First, just give me your take on what happened last night and what it means moving forward.
Well, I don't think the outcome of the runoff for United States Senate, the Republican side, was a surprise. Ken Paxton had been ahead in the polls by 4, 5, 6 points before the Trump endorsement, and that clearly added to his lead. But I was surprised at the margin. He won almost 2-1, and he won all over the state very uniformly. So it was not unexpected, but still surprising.
Is this a start of a new era for the Republican Party in Texas?
Well, a lot of people are asking that. I think that the beginning of a new era was the 2014 Republican primaries, where Governor Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Patrick and Ken Paxton for Attorney General all came into office at the same time, and they won their races by about 20 points. And so that was the beginning. I think the Paxton impeachment was another stage in the process where Paxton's lawyers argued very clearly that this was the end of the Bush era in Texas and a new MAGA era was beginning. And I think that this election yesterday put an exclamation point on that.
Maybe the better question then would have been not is this the start of a new era, but is this the end of an old era in Republican politics in Texas?
Yeah, I think it is the end of an era in which the Republican Party was led by a business-friendly wing. That would be George W. Bush and Republicans even earlier than him. And they remain competitive in recent years, not the majority in the Republican electorate, but still competitive. I think that's over now. This is the MAGA era of the Republican Party. But it's not clear how long that era will last. Donald Trump is in, we believe, his last term as president. It's not entirely clear what the candidates will be to replace him, but this is a new era. There's just a question of whether it lasts long enough to actually be called an era.
Let's turn our attention to the general race ahead then, sir. Democrats now think they have a chance of winning this Senate seat in November. Do they?
Yeah, I think for a Democrat to be competitive statewide in Texas, they need three things. The candidate has to be compelling. I think James Talarico is. His sincere religiosity is an interesting addition to his progressive policy positions. Then that candidate has to have plenty of money, and he will. And then he's got to run a flawless race. This is the first time that Talarico has run statewide. We don't know how good a candidate he will be across the state. If he doesn't make mistakes, you got a good candidate, lots of money, flawless campaign, could be close.
How nasty do you think this general election race is going to get?
Oh, I think it's going to reflect the nastiness of the Republican primary. The Democrat primary was signed, sealed, and delivered in the first election, and the down ballot races on that side of the ticket had been fairly calm. But this Senate primary on the Republican side was a knife fight. And so I think that with Paxton as the nominee, that's the way he's going to go at it. And Talarico will have to decide whether he responds in kind, completely dedicating his campaign to that sort of a knife fight, or does he try to rise above it with some of his policy talk and his sincere religiosity? We'll see what course he decides to take.
We've spoken a little bit, sir, on what you believe it would take for Talarico to win. What will it take for Ken Paxton to win this race?
Yeah, Ken Paxton is the favorite in this race because no Democrat has won statewide in Texas in more than 3 decades. Generally, the Republican margin statewide for your average candidate is 7 or 8 points these days, used to be higher than that. And so what he has to convince the Texas electorate of, and that general election electorate is broader than he deals with in the Republican primary, he has to convince that broader electorate that he is morally, ethically, and politically acceptable as the face of Texas in Washington.
What will that take? Do you think he can do that? We've already seen Talarico call on him the most corrupt politician in America.
Yeah, but more importantly, John Cornyn just a couple of days ago was calling him ineligible to be a United States senator because of his moral and ethical shortcomings. We'll see what role Cornyn takes in the general election. He said that he will support the Republican ticket, but will he stand shoulder to shoulder with Paxton and call on his voters to roll in behind Paxton? That's not entirely clear yet. And Paxton, like Talarico, will have to run a careful campaign where they don't stumble and suggest to people that they just don't have what it takes to represent Texas in Washington.
Two more questions for you, sir. You've been generous with your time. You alluded to the first one already. What is the difference between the people who showed up to vote in Tuesday's runoff versus the people who are going to show up in November, and what impact will that have?
Yeah, the primary electorate on the Republican side in Texas, about 15% or so of eligible voters. A runoff is only about 8%. So it's a lower turnout event. It's yeastier Republican, deeply committed ideologues. Same on the Democrat side. But when you get to the general election, it's all Texans. It's committed partisans on both sides. But there are people in the middle, independents, and people who don't watch politics that closely. So the question is, can Talarico, as the Democrat who starts from behind, win a majority, 60% or so of that available vote in the middle, which is not that large, in order to narrowly prevail? And Beto O'Rourke almost did that in 2018, came up 2.6% of the vote short. We'll see whether Talarico can make that final plunge across the 50% line.